screenings, everything that women have to worry about. I think we need a separate calendar for this. That we can also share with our partners or family or even colleagues.
If I tell you Kung Fu Helper, what kind of vibe is that?
That sounds like Super Bench.
There you go.
Okay, are we gonna do this?
Yeah, it's being recorded.
Now? We were already living in Singapore and I already thought that, okay, at least in the APAC region, the density of talent is already quite high. And it's already quite exceptional for the region we're in. But then you go to the US, specifically the West Coast, specifically like San Francisco or even like Seattle to some degree, the density can be much, much, much higher.
Yeah.
At a scale that is easy to describe quantitatively, but you don't know it until you've seen it happen. Like you go to a WeWork and like every other person you talk to is working in deep tech and doing like super cool things. And not just that, they have a product out. Not just that, like they can talk about how the product works. Not just that, but they're willing to ask you about what you think and they're willing to like enter into that conversation where you can poke holes in their reasoning. They're willing to be challenged and to defend what their beliefs are. And then people are able to do that at such a depth that previously you would just not be exposed to. I myself think quite critically in general.
You're very introspective.
Yeah, like I'm introspective. I challenge what I think about all the time. I ask people to poke holes. Sometimes it leads to uncomfortable conversations, but I think in general I do lean into it. But something I'm not used to is being in an environment where I'm with like 9, 10 other people who are also doing that. When you're experiencing that for the first time, it's maybe initially a feeling of intimidation that you experience. But at least for me, that was quickly overtaken by a feeling of excitement and wanting for more and realizing, no, I have to be here. I need to be in the place where I'm constantly, because this is where you grow. Because if in close proximity, there are people whose thinking is just at the same level or like 10 times higher, then obviously you should be in that place if you're optimizing for how do I, get to the next level of deep introspection, deep thinking. And hopefully that translates as well to the degree of success that your startup has. Imagine that extrapolated to like even 365 days of just that constant exposure, extrapolated to 5 years, 10 years. And then you start drawing out, what is the difference if I was here compared to if I wasn't?
I talked to so many people about that when I was there because my family moved to Malaysia when I was a kid, so I saw what it's like to live a decade somewhere else. And more than a decade. And now again, we're in the second decade of living abroad. So I'm very conscious about how will living 10 years in this city versus that city versus SF versus Tokyo, like what sort of person will I have become by the end of it, given everything?
I feel like there is some sort of, it's not necessarily negative, but there is this syndrome that post SF first timer people have. Like if you are working in startups or like you run a startup, and you go to SF for the first time and then you come back, there's this funny phenomenon where like you just keep talking about SF and you're talking about like when you're there and you're talking about the difference. If you're not talking about it, you're probably thinking about it. I would argue that pre-product market fit, maybe even pre-Series A, I suspect that the delta from living in SF, just outcome-wise, is a lot higher. If you see it as an actuarial problem, pre-seed to seed, seed to Series A, I suspect it's like that chasm, like first 3 steps. That's where it's like, oh wow, like the success rate. Maybe in Singapore, for example, which is already a hub, maybe you have a 5% chance, 2% chance. But for some reason in SF, it's 10. Maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20%.